Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, all praise is due to Allah, the Lord of all the worlds. As usual, we welcome our friends in South Africa, the United States, and around the world to this week's edition of A Conversation with El-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan. I'm pleased to be your host, coming to you once again through the Salam Media platform out of Johannesburg, South Africa. Salam Media is an online portal for humanitarian journalism. We don't just report the news, we advise you on what you can do about it. Today's broadcast is titled The Gaza Crisis, an African-American Human Rights Perspective. Brothers and sisters, friends out there is a verse in the Quran that reads, in translation of the meaning, "Do not become an advocate for those who betray their trusts." This ayah from the Quran is a fitting reminder for today's broadcast. I want to begin the broadcast with a piece of video that will set the tone for what follows, inshallah. Let's see the video, Brother Sadiq.
I spent 10 days in Palestine, in the occupied territories, and in Israel proper. What I expected was that I would find a situation in which it was hard to discern right from wrong. It was hard to understand the morality at play. It was hard to understand the conflict. And perhaps the most shocking thing was I immediately understood what was going on over there. And I have to say, it was quite familiar. Again, I was in a territory where your mobility is inhibited, where your voting rights are inhibited, where your right to the water is inhibited, where your right to housing is inhibited, and it's all inhibited based on ethnicity. Israel's a segregated society. The occupied territories are segregated. The Jews segregated. It's not, hard to understand. There are different signs for where different people can go. There are different license plates forbidding different people from going different places. Now, what the authorities will tell you is that this is a security measure. But if you go back to the history of Jim Crow in this country, they would tell you the exact same thing. People always have good reasons besides, I hate you and I don't like you, to justify their right for imposing an oppressive regime on other people. It's never quite that simple.
No, it isn't. And I just want to reemphasize something that Ta-Nehisi Coates, who spent 10 days in occupied Palestine, what he said. Of special note, what I expected was that I would find a situation in which it was hard to discern right from wrong. It was hard to understand the morality at play. It was hard to understand the conflict. Perhaps the most shocking thing was I immediately understood what was going on. And I have to say it was quite familiar. I was in a territory where your mobility is inhibited, where your voting rights are inhibited, where your right to the water is inhibited, where your right to housing is inhibited, and it's all inhibited based on ethnicity. Israel is a segregated society, quote unquote. Now, he went on to note that it's not just a segregated society. However, it is a deeply oppressive society. And brothers and sisters, friends, the stats, they speak for themselves. Apartheid Zionist Israel has killed over 22,000 Palestinians, according to the official records of the Gaza Health Ministry since October 7th. The deceased are overwhelmingly civilians, predominantly women and children. 104 journalists, at least that number, have been killed. Israel has bombed homes, churches, mosques, and it has bombed over 300 schools, 23 hospitals, and it has killed 374 Gazan doctors, dentists, and nurses. And, as if that wasn't enough, as if destroying hospitals weren't enough. SubhanAllah, over 100 ambulances have been destroyed. It has displaced 1.9 million Palestinians, according to the Gaza government media office, and imposed an illegal siege, cutting off much needed food, water, fuel, electricity, and medical supplies to Gaza, according to the Ministry of Health in Gaza. SubhanAllah, more than 10 Palestinian children. Listen to this stat. More than 10 Palestinian children are losing limbs, primarily legs, each day. And as if this were not enough, Israel has now openly hinted at a 7-front war in the region. And while the venal propagandists would have us believe it's all about Hamas and its violent provocations, quote unquote, from Gaza, there have been close to 300 Palestinians killed and over 4,500 imprisoned on the West Bank since October 7th. This is ethnic cleansing and genocide across the Palestinian board, plain and simple. Now, the consequences of this reality resulted in the following stats last month, December 2023. I saw the reported results of a Harvard University public opinion poll that said, now listen closely, 51% of young people in America believe that the right solution to ending the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is ending the existence of the state of Israel. What they were saying, in essence, is that apartheid Zionist Israel has no more right to exist than did apartheid South Africa. 51% of young people. 67% said Jews are oppressors and should be treated as such. 67% supported an unconditional ceasefire that would release detainees in Gaza. 76% believe Hamas is an organization that can be negotiated with to achieve peace. 76% of young Americans surveyed said that they believe Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. The poll was reportedly conducted by the Harris Institute and the Center for American Policy Studies at Harvard University. Meanwhile, the International Court of Justice, also known as the World Court, the highest United Nations legal body in the world, has just begun proceedings against apartheid Israel, proceedings that were triggered by an official complaint made by South Africa under the Genocide Convention. The opportunity and challenge for Black Americans is a significant one. The perspective of Ta-Nehisi Coates is that of a number of other African Americans of prominence, and I should say, and that of a or versus that of a number of other African Americans of prominence who have traveled to occupied Palestine is stark. I want to repeat that for clarity, because it's very, very important. The perspective of Ta-Nehisi Coates versus that of a number of other African Americans of prominence who have traveled to occupied Palestine is stark, very stark indeed. Coates returned to the U.S. and reported what he saw, while others have chosen to remain silent, or even worse, they chose to provide political cover for crimes against humanity. Now, who are these African American offenders? Members of the president's cabinet, members of the U.S. Congressional Black Caucus, both the House and Senate, and at least one big city mayor, city and state legislators, religious leaders, business leaders, journalists, members of academia, law enforcement officers, and the list goes on and on. Apartheid Zionist Israel and its vaunted lobby have employed a variety of stratagems to seduce or coerce blind, unquestioning allegiance. The looming question before self-respecting African Americans and other citizens of conscience is the following: are we willing to tolerate leaders who have been so dangerously compromised? The first United States president, General George Washington, warned his compatriots in 1789 and those who would follow in successive generations. In his farewell address to the Union, he warned of the dangers of giving favorite nation status to any nation. I repeat, George Washington warned against the type of relationship that America has with the apartheid Zionist state of Israel, a relationship on steroids. Whether we realize it or not, this incestuous relationship has very profound implications on the domestic side of our American lives. And this is a bit of advice, hopefully awakening nasiha that I'm offering to my brothers and sisters of all persuasions here in the United States of America. There are grave implications for what is being done in occupied Palestine with our tax dollars, with the active support of a U.S. president and a U.S. Congress and other elements, political elements within the within this socio-political infrastructure of ours. Not to leave out the media, mainstream media across the board, and much of the alternative media. There are grave consequences for what we see being done today. Something that goes against the predominant will of the vast majority of Americans in the United States. I mean, subhanAllah, the majority of public opinion in the U.S. is like the majority of public opinion throughout the world. The demonstrations that have been taking place in cities and towns, large and small, consistently over the past 3 months. It should be a wake-up call for all of us. Public opinion is against apartheid Israel. Public opinion is against those elements within the socio-political infrastructure of nation states, America, Britain, France, Germany, and other major Western powers, and most of the nation states in the global South. It's against, public opinion is against what the state of Israel is doing with the support of many other nation states. It's brothers and sisters, we are at a very serious potential crossroads, especially given what South Africa has done with the support so far. From what I have seen, I don't know if things have changed since then, but I know of Turkey and Malaysia that have endorsed, given their support to the complaint that South Africa has made in the World Court, a complaint that Israel is not able to ignore, a complaint that the United States and Britain and France and Germany and other powers that are supporting apartheid Israel are not able to ignore. This is an action that many of the Muslim states who have been shamefully silent are not able to ignore. I hear that there has been some kind of movement within the OIC and the Arab League. I'm waiting to get clarity on this from my perspective, because I haven't seen the evidence. This rumor that there is some serious movement taking place in those two bodies, in the Arab League and also in the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Conference. Hopefully there is. If there is, it's about time. It's long overdue. But I just want to say, for the sake of today's presentation, and this is a shortened presentation. This is not going to be our usual hour. This is going to be a shortened presentation, but hopefully short and sweet, because of what is taking place right now, what is unfolding right now in the World Court. 2 days, from what I understand, 2 days of scheduled testimony. And my understanding also is that a not so highly respected attorney is escaping me at the moment, very well known, but not as expected as he once was back in the day, is representing, an American attorney is representing apartheid Israel as the lead attorney in its arguments against the complaint brought by South Africa. And it's a reminder of the fact that, birds of a feather flock together. This is an individual who right now is under a tremendous cloud himself. And but anyway, this is where we are. There was a piece of information I wanted to share, but inshallah ta'ala, I will share it later. It comes from a document known as the Journalist's Creed. You can pull it up and read it for yourself. It is a very, very, very profound document. It lays out the ethics that journalists, media organizations of all stripes should adhere to in order to provide a credible service to their consumers. The Journalist's Creed. And if you ever visit Washington, D.C., the nation's capital here in the United States, and you pay a visit to the National Press Club, it is a proclamation that greets you as you walk into the press club itself. It's on the wall, very prominently displayed. At least it was the last time I visited the press club about a year or so ago. That was how it was brought to my attention years ago when I first visited the press club. It's a very, very impressive statement, and it's one that journalists of all stripes should take to heart. I'm just looking to see if there was something else I wanted to share with you in this broadcast today before we sign off. Again, this is a shortened broadcast for the new year. Inshallah ta'ala, we'll come back a week from now with a full broadcast. But this one will hopefully whet the appetite for what comes later. I should also note that there are 120 countries who voted for a ceasefire in the United Nations. And of those 120 countries, only 14 or 14 beyond those that 120 voted against the ceasefire. 120 countries voted for the ceasefire in the UN, and only 14 countries voted against it. And that, again, is an indication of where global public opinion is on this issue. In addition to Ta-Nehisi Coates, I can't count the number of people of all stripes who I know personally who have traveled to occupied Palestine over the years and said nothing about the oppression that they witnessed. I should say, unlike Ta-Nehisi Coates. I can't count the number of people. For most, it seems it was nothing more than an exotic vacation experience that they could put on their resumes and boast about. My most profoundest appointment is connected to the Arabs, however, and the Muslims and the African Americans who have gone there, seen what they've saw, and then remain silent or near silent about the gross human rights violations that they witnessed with their own eyes and ears. Hopefully, we are now at a turning point, and things will change. Hopefully, we are at a turning point. And on that note, I want to conclude the broadcast, today's broadcast, with with an interesting exchange that I had with an individual who is close to, and this is a Muslim who is close to a very prominent figure, a very prominent scholar, American Muslim scholar who got a rather testy welcome at a major conference, a major annual conference that took place in Canada over the holiday weekend in December. The scholar was booed and jeered by a large part of an audience because of his normalization behavior with the apartheid state of Israel, along with others. He's not alone. A number of predominantly Muslim nation states and Arab states and other figures right here in the United States and other part of the West have engaged in a normalization process with the apartheid state of Israel that has now resulted in them being called out. Well, anyway, there was an exchange that took place, a social media exchange that took place with me and one of the associates of this scholar. He published a statement in which he said, going forward, this is a quote, going forward, no criticism of scholars or their views, political or otherwise, will be permitted or tolerated on my page by anyone or for any reason. Let's say something nice, polite, and educational about them and their works, books, talks, protests, quotes. My mind is in a protest orientation, but he said quotes, etc., or stay silent. This should not be hard. He then went on to say, this page is for building ourselves intellectually, spiritually, and lovingly, and not to waste time finding faults, promoting division, and having toxic debates. Thank you for abiding by this rule and for your contributions. Now, my response to this scholar associated with this larger, more prominent scholar was the following. With all due respect, we cannot collectively build strong, accountable leadership leading to strong, viable communities without healthy, i.e. constructive criticism when needed. If this is beyond your capacity, my brother, you should divorce yourself from my page. His response to me was, Mauri Saalakhan, feel welcome to do that elsewhere. There are thousands of pages where you can do that. Feel welcome to unfriend me. No problem. All the best, dear brother. And then he followed that up just a few minutes later with, Mauri Saalakhan, I just unfriended you. Now, that was no skin off my back. He was the one who approached me for a social media friend-oriented relationship in the first place. But, I would simply say to my brothers and sisters who think the same way that he does, we have a responsibility to stand firmly for justice as witnesses, even if it be against ourselves. We have that responsibility. This is in the Quran. It is clear. There is nothing ambiguous about that order from on high. I also would like to remind my brothers and sisters who think this way, who think the way of this scholar, that we have the example of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq when he accepted the mantle of leadership after the passing of the Prophet, may peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. Abu Bakr is reported to have said, "Hear, O people, here I have been made a leader over you when I am not the best from among you. If I do well, help me. If I do wrong, correct me." If this standard of conduct was good for one of the leading companions of our beloved Prophet, peace be upon him, following the example of the Prophet, it's good for all of us. And on that note, I will end. I'd like to wish my brothers and sisters and my friends throughout the world a blessed new year. Please make dua. Keep those brothers and sisters of ours and those outside of our ranks who are being oppressed. Keep them in your prayers. Remember them in your prayers. And don't let anyone persuade you into thinking that your conscious opposition to oppression doesn't make a difference, because it does. It does. On this note, I end, as we normally do, with the verse from the Surah Al-Asr, from the Quran. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wal Asr. Innal insana lafi kusr. Illa alladhina amanu wa amalu salihati. Wa tawasaw bil haqq. Wa tawasaw bis sabr. Which means, in translation of the meaning, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, by the token of time, through the ages, surely humanity is in loss, except those who believe and do good, and exhort one another to truth, and exhort one another to patiently persevere. Peace be unto you. Assalamu alaikum.